Imagine LA surrounded by nuclear-tipped missiles, Air Force bases scattered around the city, and one of the launch sites here in the humble South Bay. Sounds like a dystopian future? Not quite. It was the recent past. Find out more on PCC TV. PCC TV. Today's episode, Nukes in the South Bay. Now, when you think of the South Bay, you think of an island of calm in the chaos of LA. The beaches, the surfing, the restaurants, resort hotels, golf courses, the gorgeous hills of Palos Verdes. In this video, we'll take a rare trip inside one of the nuclear bases. But before we do, how did this idyllic landscape become the home of significant military installations? It was started a long time ago, and by another country. Yes, another country, but at the time, California was in another country. In the 1840s, Mexico first designated an area above the San Pedro Bay as a strategic site to be used for coastal defense, but no one got around to building on it. After the U.S. won the Mexican-American War, it also won this property and essentially took a page out of the Mexican strategy and didn't do anything with it either, even after the local railroad decided to just build some tracks across the property. It took until World War I for the government to start building. And once started, well, you know how binge watching a TV show is like. For the government, it's the same, and the contractors, and spending your tax dollars building is the same thing. And besides, during World War I, you never know when the Germans may attack the West Coast.
Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
German? Forget it, he's rolling.
As a reminder, Japan was our ally in World War I. Anyway, expansion continued after the war ended, with further military posts created up and down the coast into now what is Rancho Palos Verdes, with the establishment of Long Point Military Reservation in 1930 to house 6 fire control stations for the large caliber guns at Fort MacArthur. Things slowed down during the Depression, but with the outbreak of World War II, new construction began in earnest, resulting in the peninsula bristling with cannons and radars and observation stations and searchlights. Most relevant was the construction of Battery 240 in 1942 on the newly established Point Vicente Military Reservation in the hills above the scenic Point Vicente Lighthouse. Improvements over the years placed Battery 240 in some 24 support buildings or structures and a small rifle range on the reservation. History sidebar. Now, near as I can tell, there were only 3 recorded attacks by the Japanese on the mainland USA during World War II. One was the shelling of the oil fields north of Santa Barbara, the site of a current golf course. The second was the shelling of Fort Stevens, and again by a submarine, and again this time it's now a park. And the third was the bombing of Oregon with a plane flown off a submarine. Return on investment moment. I wonder how much money was spent on the defenses of the coast compared to the severity of the attacks. And by the way, the Japanese apparently really dislike Oregon. In any case, spoiler alert, the US won the war. And after the war, there wasn't much of an appetite to maintain the defense military coastal fortifications that were created, especially with the changes in warfare highlighted by the Second World War. The future of war would not be fought with big guns on ships or forts. Rather, it would be a threat from the sky. Now, fortunately for the military-industrial complex, another war broke out, the Korean War, and then the Cold War. And it was decided to update the defense systems of the U.S. and spend on active surface-to-air, SAM, missile systems for major cities. LA was a lucky winner and was surrounded by 16 Nike, no, not the sneaker, but Nike missile sites, our very own Ring of Fire. But the one that we'll focus on today is the local system, or the closest system, if you like. LA 55 Point Vicente, located in Rancho Palos Verdes, which became operational in 1956. Look, it's just up the street from Marineland. How cute! And just as cute as the little dolphin statue is, was the Nike missile system. Now, it had its roots during World War II when Bell Labs developed an idea of an interceptor rocket controlled by a series of ground radar systems to replace the existing systems. Nike was launched as a first-generation missile called the Nike Ajax. It was a two-stage missile, with the first stage powered by solid rockets and the second stage powered by liquid fuel, with a whole bunch of vacuum tubes powering the whole lot. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? The sites were usually in groups of 2 or 4, and the missiles were stored completely underground when not in launch mode. Think Thunderbirds with cranes and lifts and whatnot. To launch, a door would open, the elevator system would lift up the rocket and whoosh, next thing you know it was gone. To support the missiles, various other locations, such as a radar base on what is now Del Cerro Park, were established at the same time. Yes, I know what you're saying. All very interesting history, but where do the nukes come in? Well, in 1961, improved versions of the missiles, second-generation Nikes, were developed, and these were so-called Hercules variants. They were bigger and heavier and faster and flew farther than the Ajax, and, best of all, they could carry a nuclear warhead. Now, allegedly, 80% of the Nike Hercules missiles carried a nuclear payload as deployed. And hey, that's a pretty big percentage. 3 nuclear yield variants were deployed on these missiles starting in 1958, with 2,550 of them in total produced. Now, the options were a 2-kiloton payload, a 20-kiloton payload, or even the supersized 40-kiloton payload. Well, time flies. The 50s and the 60s rolled on, technology progressed, and the next thing you know, as the 1950 technology of the Nike sites made them obsolete. So in the late 70s, Site 55L was decommissioned, and the city of RPV acquired it, and the whole area is now part of City Hall. Now, to be fair, the best preserved Nike installation is Site SF88L, which is run by the National Park Service, located near the Golden Gate Bridge. The site is now a museum. It still contains the missile bunkers, a control area, a missile, all sorts of cool stuff. Definitely worth a visit if you're up there. Now, before we look at what's left of Site 55, let's pop back and ponder this thought. Early rockets were less than reliable delivery devices. The Germans had all sorts of issues making their vengeance weapons work during World War II. And then, after the war, the Russians, with their German scientists, also had issues. And America had to follow them into the space age with our German scientists, and we also had issues. Now, aside from the odd test firing, no Nikes were ever launched from any of the US bases that I'm aware of. So, were they reliable? Would they have worked? I don't know. So, as a thought experiment, what would have happened were a nuclear-tipped missile launched in PV and had an issue? Well, the scientists at MIT have developed an interesting nuclear explosion simulator. Simply choose your payload, and you get to see the effects. How fun. Okay, for reference, the nuclear bomb dropped on Hiroshima during World War II yielded 15 kilotons, and the one dropped on Nagasaki was almost 20 kilotons. So applying the paltry 2-kiloton payload to an explosion in Palos Verdes, just a few thousand dead, a few thousand more practically dead, and a few wildfires, etc. But, you see, barely an inconvenience. Okay, let's not even talk about fallout, but fallout schmallout. So let's look at the 40-kiloton payload. Whoa. Will it make a difference? It sure does. And the death toll increases pretty much. By looks of it, I and my house get incinerated. But what's a few deaths in relation to the security of a 1950s era unstable technology defending the city of LA? Fortunately, they never had to be used, and we never had to find out. So what a wild thought experiment. The cognitive dissonance between the South Bay that we know and the chaos of a nuclear accident that could have been. And it all because of the nukes in our backyard. It's a small chapter of LA history that most folks don't know. So now let's take a look at the now part of the story. What remains of this period is a now retired nuclear base, and ironically is used as the city maintenance yard. And beneath the piles of gravel lie the empty chambers of a once nuclear deterrence, here in our very own backyard. In the lighthouse at the foot of the retired nuclear base, unchanged since the 20s. Marineland, now a luxury hotel. So thanks for taking this journey with me. I learned more about missiles than I thought I'd ever want to know. And by the way, if you want an actual Nike missile, you can purchase one, albeit one on a smaller scale, from Estes. I might have to just get one of these little things. If you've been watching this far, I thank you.
Bye.